Good afternoon. I'd like to call the Finance Committee to order, please. First order of business. First, is there any public comments, Doug?
No, there are no public speakers. No
Okay.
public comments.
Then the first order of business is the approval of minutes of our May 18th meeting. Motion, please. Second, please. All in favor? Any opposed? So moved. Doug, would you take us through the committee work plan, please?
We have no changes to the work plan this month.
Okay, and then go right into the budgets, please. Budget Watch.
Sure, thanks. This month's Budget Watch focuses on operating results through May and subsidy results through June. We've had overall positive results for the month and year-to-date. I'm going to start with the month. And operating results were favorable as we had operating expenses that were $34.1 million or 4.4% favorable. Toll revenue continues to perform well. That was $7.4 million or 4.8% favorable. Passenger revenue was $4.7 million or 1.0% favorable. We've done well in that category since the winter weather that we had the first quarter. We continue to have favorable real estate transaction taxes. They were $43.9 million or 50.6% favorable. We had a couple negative categories. The petroleum business tax, PBT, was $9.3 million or 16.1% unfavorable, and MTA aid taxes and fees were $13.2 million or 17.2% unfavorable. I'm going to talk about year-to-date results right now. Real estate, on the favorable side, real estate transaction taxes have come in $212 million or 41% favorable, and that's particularly in the urban tax category. Toll revenue has been consistently high. We're $22 million or 3.2% favorable. Debt service has been $51 million favorable or 4.9% favorable. Some of that is timing, but some of that is our real savings from lower variable rates. Operating expenses year-to-date are $69 million or 1.7% favorable. We have some timing-related variances, but we have some real savings in vacancies, fuel, pension, and health and welfare expenses. We continue to run a little bit unfavorable on overtime, but we're doing a lot better in that category as well. On the unfavorable side, we have the MTA taxes and fees, which are $16.5 million or 11.1% unfavorable. We're talking to the state to try to figure out what's happening there. And as I mentioned earlier, passenger revenue year-to-date is $29 million unfavorable. But again, that was all in the first quarter with winter impacts, and we're slowly chipping away at that unfavorable amount. I'd also like to report that we had been reporting unfavorable PMT collections, but actually that was an error on our part based on an erroneous March number. We're actually doing pretty much the budget in that category. So overall, we're doing quite well, and these re-estimates will be found in the July mid-year forecast. That'll be part of the July financial plan. Are there any questions? Yes, sir?
I'd like to talk about fuel hedges, if I may. Obviously, the purpose of what you're doing, the numbers, I want to find out whether we're making, how much we're losing, or what the averages are. As I understand it on the fuel hedges, the purpose of our doing it is to provide stability so that we know that sometimes the hedges benefit us and sometimes they don't. Over the course of the past, take a period, a year, 2 years, what have our results been?
Well, first of all, one thing, Chuck, I don't think you should use 1 year or 2 years because we had this huge collapse,
Yep.
in the end of last year in January. So that's going to distort the thing. I think if you really want to get a picture, you're going to have to look at a longer time
No
frame.
problem. I don't disagree at all.
So, to answer your question, we'll be coming to the committee in October. It's on the work plan to address all of our synthetic, all of our variable rate portfolio, including fuel hedges, and we'll report then how things have gone over the past year.
Please understand that I think it's commendable, it's good, it's necessary, and I have no question at all about the appropriateness of it. I just want to know what the bottom line is, that's all.
Okay, and we'll be happy to report that, at the October meeting when we have our full year assessment of the transactions.
Yes, during the adoption of the budget in December, we had a discussion on a motion put forward by myself and Mitch Paley for the restoration of services throughout the region to the tune of $30 million, something this board has done over the past several years through this process. The past practice for the past couple of years has been we'd make the motion and we would evaluate where we were come the late spring, early summer for the July budget correction, for lack of a better word. At the time, I agreed to table the motion for that, and I'm going to move that that motion come back on the table, given the fiscal picture of that has just been reported. We are in better shape, absent a resolution of the capital budget, which God knows where that's going, but in the world of a capital budget, $30 million expenditure is hardly something to even consider. That the Capelli or the Balin-Capelli motion be adopted for consideration and inclusion in the July financial plan. So I make that as a motion to restore to the table, from the table.
In the July plan, we will address these and other issues, but I do have to point out that the favorable results that Doug just presented are largely results of the real property transfer tax. We had a favorable variance of $211 million from real estate taxes that's just this year. There's no sense that that is something that could be repeated, and as most of the board members here are well aware, we relied upon real estate revenues in prior to 2007, and between 2007 and 2009, we went from $1.7 billion of real estate revenues to less than $400 million in real estate revenues. To present the possibility of additional service based on favorable results at this time, largely driven by real estate, is something that we wouldn't be presenting. But again, we will look at service, as we always do, as we approach the July plan.
Also, I don't think you can, Alan, I don't think you can just dismiss the fact that we don't have the financing for the capital plan, because, as we all know, that's a very, very serious and important matter, the MTA, for us to carry on and run a safe operation and a proper operation. So I think you got to take a look and see where everything stands, and we may need every bit of dollars that we can harbor to keep the system in a state of good repair. And I don't personally think we should be certainly taking any moves that would add expenses or anything onto the operation until we have a resolution of the capital plan. And I don't think that can be dismissed. I think it's a very key item.
I think Commissioner Capelli raises an important issue, though. If you weren't there, Andrew, but at Transit this morning, we have ever-increasing amounts of riders, and we need service in a lot of places where service was cut in 2010 in order to accommodate those riders. So while the capital plan is a very important factor, and we all want to see it passed, I don't think, the condition of the current system can wait until all of that gets done. We certainly need a plan in place, should that happen, where we can supply more service to the riders that are jamming our system in ever-increasing numbers.
We're going to have an open discussion in July when the budget numbers are out. Let's wait till that happens. In July, I assure you, we will have an open finance committee meeting, and we will discuss everything at that time.
And
everything's on the table.
And that's, as long as we know that, and as part of that, because, in the past couple of years, we have managed to add service because of the July program. The chairman has made that commitment on a number of occasions. He's made that commitment again this year. So I think, when we get to the July program, we'll also know what the state legislature may or may not have done. But I don't think, I agree with Commissioner Albert, I don't think that by itself should be a determining factor in what we do. We have a responsibility here to provide additional service as necessary because of the increased ridership, both on the subway and the commuter rails. So I look forward to that report with all of the appropriate information so that we can see what we can do at that time. So
And you guys.
we'll leave it at that for the moment.
The committee has Bob's and my assurance that
Good.
at the July meeting, we will have an open discussion of not only service, but everything else, including the capital plan and everything. So if we just sit tight, it'll happen, I promise you.
I would just like to point out, though, that this is the Finance Committee meeting having a conversation in June prior to the presentation in July, so that it is important that the sentiment of many of the members of this room, okay, be expressed to the chair and to the chairman of the committee, that some of the best things that we've done these past 4 years has been the restoration of some of these cuts, and some of the best things that have been announced today have been restorations or new service that was created as a result of the actions that we took last year, the year before, at exactly this time, when our fiscal situation was not as positive as it is today on a comparative basis. And yes, I understand that the capital program is a mess, and I spoke about that earlier, and I won't go into it again, from at the transit meeting. But it is incumbent upon us, we can't be held captive, and our riders can't be held captive to an action in Albany over something of a mega nature when there are things, at least within our control, that we can do to alleviate the overcrowding conditions.
I think there's one other fact that we have to await, and that is the adoption of a city budget. As Commissioner Trottenberg pointed out earlier at Transit, they're in the process of trying to put the pieces together there and to determine exactly what the city can and should do vis-a-vis the MTA. So there are a whole range of factors that have to be considered. What I would suggest, if I may, the chair has indicated that we will have this on the table in July. It seems to me that at that time, you already have the message from a fair number of people. They want to address that subject of increased service. Hopefully by then we'll know what the city budget looks like. We'll know what the situation is with respect to the capital plan in Albany. And we'll have some further figures from a variety of sources. So if we can agree to put this as a subject of debate in July, that would be fine for me.
I assume that means that we're going to do it regardless of whether we have answers to the hanging questions, because I think we do need to discuss it.
Knowing this committee, I don't think there's any question that July is the end game, okay? All right, go ahead, Doug. I guess we're going to Finance Watch now?
Yeah, being no questions in budget, more budget.
Is there
watch,
anything
we're
else
gonna
on
move to
the,
Finance Watch?
no. Pat, go ahead.
Okay. So Finance Watch appears on page 22 of your committee materials this morning. We have a few transactions to report on. The first being a diesel fuel hedge of $5.9 million. That was executed on May 28th. At an all-in price of $1.997 per gallon. Again, this is for ultra-low sulfur diesel for the revenue fleet of both transit bus as well as the railroad where we have diesel locomotives, the railroads. The winning bid on the transaction was Merrill Lynch Commodities, Inc. Next, we priced $500 million of MTA transportation revenue bond anticipation notes, or bands, last Thursday. You were emailed the documents on this. We were very pleased with the bidding. We had 17 unique bidders submitting a total of 42 bids for the notes. Something unique that we did is we allowed bids to be submitted for as small as 10 million notes, which allowed, at least in our mind, firms large and small to participate in the transaction, and I think the result shows that they did. The winning bids, there were 4 winning bids that were utilized, the lowest being those submitted by FTN, which is a First Tennessee National Bank. They're one of our selling group members. We were very pleased that they participated for 40 million notes. Next was Goldman Sachs purchasing 100 million notes. And lastly, Bank of America Merrill Lynch purchasing the balance 360 million notes. So these notes come due next March 1st. They'll allow us to finance existing approved transit and commuter projects in the interim, so that when we take the notes out with long-term bonds next spring, we'll have a very clear knowledge of what the proceeds were spent on, and that will allow us to properly structure the long-term fixed-rate bonds taking out the notes. The yields were really attractive, again, ranging from the best at a 0.20% to the next best at a 0.21%, and then for the 360 balance, a 0.257% on the notes. So very low cost of funds over the time period that will be in the market. Mr. Ballin.
Thank you. The firms who win those bids do a great service to us by providing liquidity, and that they're really stepping up. Do they get, when you go to do the negotiated side of things, do they get credit for that as part of the consideration for where they are in the rotation or some similar type issues?
We certainly, whenever we're looking at merit assignments down the road, we certainly look at, as well as ongoing service and ongoing banking ideas, we do look at performance on competitively bid transactions. So that's absolutely part of the data set that we look at as we're making those decisions.
Appropriate, and thank you. Okay.
Sure. Okay. We want to report on an upcoming remarketing. This is a $193 million of TBTA general revenue refunding bonds. This is the 05B3s. The incumbent bank providing a standby bond purchase agreement is Bank of America. You may recall, earlier in the year we went out with a request for proposals from commercial banks to provide letters of credit, and we are replacing Bank of America with a lower cost bank here. In this case, it will be Bank of Tokyo Mitsubishi providing a letter of credit. So we're actively working on that, and we'll report on the results next month. Lastly, I just want to note that we are planning to refund on a current basis $1.067 billion of bonds, transportation revenue bonds that will be callable this November 15th. We're currently looking at doing 2 transactions to take those bonds out, and we're also looking at the possibility of adding advanced refunding bond candidates in there, but the bulk of that refunding, the lion's share, will be those current candidates. Sir.
Where are we on the variable rate, the floaters?
Where are we?
Have we started to redeem any more or not?
Oh, you're talking about the auction rates? Or
Yes,
just,
I'm sorry.
No, we are currently just keeping those in the market and watching them. They're still generating a very low cost of funds for the MTA, so we're not at this point planning to take them out.
Jim? On these matters, we have one financial advisor. Are we getting to a point where this is an awful lot of business and we're going to admit more financial advisors? If so, when and how?
Sure. The financial, we currently have 2 financial advisors, one on what we would think of as the traditional bond side, and then one on our derivative side. Okay, on the bond side is Public Financial Management. We RFP'd for that service in 2013. We anticipate RFPing again for that service next year, so a 3-year cycle. And at that time...
Thank you. I appreciate that,
Sure.
and I remember that vividly.
Okay.
That's not quite my question. That's an awful lot of business for one financial advisor. Are we thinking of splitting the work?
Well, I think that's absolutely one of the options on the table as we re-RFP that. Do we need more than one? Are we being well served by one? I would say that, you know, we did cap the financial advisor in terms of the fees that we would provide during the time frame. In fact, on this note deal, they are not compensated on a note deal. So, but you point out that there is a lot of transactions, heavy transaction flow, and that will be something that the selection committee looks at as we look at this service at the RFP cycle.
So at the risk of beating a horse deader than it already is in this conversation, let me pose the question a slightly different way.
Okay.
When do you think you'll be able to get back to, at least me, but the committee, on what direction the finance department is going to go? Or we'll let you know next year is not sufficient for me right now?
I understand your point. I think when we go into the RFP cycle, we like to go in with a very open mind about who will be the provider of whatever service we're soliciting, how many providers we identify. We will look at our transaction flow and determine. I can certainly get back to you, next month, in advance of the next committee meeting, and give you some color on what we're seeing in terms of transaction flow and how we're thinking about it.
If you got back to me next month, that would be delightful. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
You focus heavily on the transaction cost. Do you have in mind the concept that free advice is worth exactly that?
No. I think, again, when we went in to negotiate the terms of the contract with the incumbent provider, we did look at the fact that we're both active in note issuances and variable rate remarketings from time to time, as well as long-term bonds. And so we structured it, again, with a cap. The firm has, in the past, consumed its cap. We believe we're continuing, even after they've consumed their cap, to get very good service from them. So I don't view that as a problem. But again, all these things come into the mix as we evaluate the incumbent provider and we evaluate the proposals that we'll be seeing next time. I'm not at a point where I would say I'm ready to give you a firm analysis of how they've done. We've had them on board for about 1.5 years, and they've been doing good work for us, as our derivatives advisor as well, Mohanty Gargiulo. So, sure.
I think the answer is no, but do we pay the BIC on the note issuance?
No, we do not.
Okay, thanks.
That's Finance Watch.
Yes, sir. Moving to MTA headquarters and all agency items, we have 3 action items. The first one, Pat will take us through.
Sure. So continuing the discussion of those refundings that I mentioned, there's slightly over $1 billion of bonds that we want to refund this year. There's a staff summary on page 32 of your committed materials, which identifies a request that we are making of the board. The refundings will be done in conjunction with the board-approved refunding policy, which allows for a fixed-rate refunding of a fixed-rate bond. I would just note, and it's discussed in detail in the staff summary, that between the years 2029 and 2035, we have over $800 million of bonds that we'll need to take out. It's a significant amount of bonds in what we would consider to be a difficult part of the yield curve. And so we are seeking specific authority from the board in this instance with respect to these currently callable bonds to allow us to issue variable rate bonds as well as fixed rate bonds. Again, making a big transaction seem smaller, breaking it up, and allowing us to come shorter on the yield curve with those variable rate bonds. So I'm happy to take any questions on this.
You have a very deep and talented group of financial firms who give you ideas all the time, and you and Bob's skills are extraordinary. So I'll clearly defer to you, but was this the consensus view of what to do with this problem of the lesser market for those years?
Well, consensus view on the part of my staff at the finance department, as well as with input from our financial advisor as well. And we've certainly seen some, investment banking ideas from our senior managers to this very point.
So is it true to say that a significant number of the bankers felt comfortable with this type of variable rate refunding idea, or?
Oh, I would say that, yeah.
Yeah. So one thing that I've wondered about, though, as you move forward with this type of thing is we should really, depending on what we're financing, be able to finance for a longer term. And I know you've been trying to do that. Are you still trying to do that?
Well, to the point of issuing the ban, that's exactly one of the goals there is to have transparency to see what we finance. And, just to give people some background on this, when we issue bonds in anticipation of invoices that come in from the capital program. So we don't know if we're paying for buses or rail cars or subway cars or station rehabs or what have you until after those proceeds have been expended.
Okay.
By issuing the bans, we'll have that information, we'll have that data, we'll know what the average lives are and so forth, and that will allow us to really hone in on the structure of those long-term fixed-rate bonds to pay off the ban. So.
And
But-
Right, and that's why we were able to do the longer bond. that you-
right.
that you know. Yeah.
And then the financial advisor signed off on this variable rate component.
Yes.
Okay, so one quick question. What's the default rate on the variable rate component going to be?
So in the past, when we've issued floating rate notes, which is the variable rate product we're looking at here on the transportation revenue credit, I wouldn't call it a default rate, it's a failed remarketing rate. And it's, we've had failed remarketing rates ranging from 9 to 11%. And that's the rate at which, if we're unable to remarket, if we're unable to access the market, the investor continues to hold that security until such time that we're able to take them out, but they're holding it at what I would call a penalty rate. I would just note that we've never been in a situation where we've had a failed remarketing or where we've had to pay a penalty rate.
Right.
But it is there to provide comfort to the investor, protection to the investor, in the event that market upheaval would keep us out of the market for some period of time.
Pat,
Yeah.
the one thing I don't think you said was that the present value of this refunding, didn't you say it was $100 million? I think that's important.
We're conservatively estimating approximately $100 million in present value
Savings.
basis.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's well in excess of our standard, but that's why you do refundings. Then what is the proportion of the variable rate component of the refunding to the fixed rate?
Well, at the moment, I don't know. The intent is to print the preliminary official statement with both fixed rate and variable rate bonds in there. We would anticipate, somewhere in the 15 to 20% range. But again, not knowing the conditions we'll see in the market that day, we want to have the flexibility. Maybe we'll go issue more, maybe we'll issue less or none. It just depends on what we're seeing in the market.
It'll all be negotiated.
Yes, this will
Sale.
be a negotiated transaction.
It has to be.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay.
One question, if I may. Given the fact that the interest rates at this juncture are at a relatively low point, I say relatively because
Yes.
who knows, and the fact that there's a general view that those rates will go up, whether it be within this calendar year or at some early date, would it make sense, have you considered the possibility of adding to the amount of debt now so that you have it at a relatively low rate so that you can call back some of the bonds going forward or avoid it at some future date? In other words, taking advantage of the low rates at this juncture.
Right. Honestly, we have not considered what I would consider to be an advance kind of funding the capital program in advance. As you know, we issue approximately $2 billion a year to fund ongoing existing approved programs. So to add to that in anticipation, I think I would be hard-pressed to say that we're going to get a better rate today than we will in 6 months or a year and a half. I truly don't know. We don't have a market view like that in the finance department. We're in good markets, we're in bad markets. I think if you look at the overall cost of the portfolio, which is in your book, I would just note that on a portfolio basis, on an aggregate basis, the entire portfolio, the cost, weighted average interest cost, is a 3.92%. So that includes bonds that mature from this year all the way out to 40 years from now. So
You cannot help read the papers and listen to the radio
Sure.
and conclude that the rates aren't going up.
right.
Why is it that we would not consider putting in a little more at this juncture to get the benefit of the lower rate?
Commissioner Murdoch, we're effectively doing that in that we have purposely not sold the amount of variable rate that we're authorized to sell, just because we wanted to try to lock in as much long-term fixed rate debt as we have, knowing that if interest rates rise, we will be better served to issue variable rate in the future, which on a relative basis will be much less expensive. So really, we're probably close to a historic low level of variable rate in our portfolio, having preferred to try to sell more fixed rate debt and lock in the cost now.
And the other side of that coin is, are we at a historic high or approaching one in the issuance of fixed rate?
No, I wouldn't say that. I think, over time, that relationship between fixed and variable rate fluctuates. We have been at higher levels in the past, particularly pre-financial crisis. And in the financial crisis, when the auction market, to your question earlier, when the auction market failed to work, we took out a significant amount of over $2 billion of those bonds with long-term fixed rate bonds. So that relationship will change over time.
You fellows
Okay, we
do-
have to move, we're really.
I
gonna
understand.
run-
I just want to have one point. You fellows do great work.
Thank you.
Nobody questions that, at least that I know of. My only point is, we all know that those rates are going to go up, and the question is, why don't we get the money at the lower rate while we can?
Right, but it costs you money, Chuck. If you don't have a use for the money and you go and sell debt, there is an interest rate cost to provide for that money that's just sitting idly by. So it's not a complete freebie. And the real question is, which nobody really knows sitting around here, yeah, rates are going to go up, but at what rate are they going to go up? Just because you have a small rate increase from the Federal Reserve, a lot of people feel it's going to be very, very slow in taking up the rates. So what you would be doing is you would be buying this debt ahead of time, putting it here where you get zero, basically zero for the short-term money till it's ready to be used, and nobody really knows, and who knows, how quickly the Fed is really going to raise the rates, because a small increase doesn't mean that you're going to have a big increase moving on. So, that's something, and I think you really have to go by the professional advisors, and as you said, the Finance Committee here, and I think we've been very prudent. If you go back into the history of the Finance Committee, we've been pushing all along, and Pat and I know have talked about it, so is the committee, to issue longer-term bonds and stay away from the shorter-term debt, because we were worried with these very low rates now that we would, that rates would go up, like you say, and we wouldn't get the cheap long-term rates that we've gotten over the years. So we've been very careful, and as Pat says, our variable rate, our short-term bond portfolio is very low, considering we're entitled to have, up 20% of our debt, Pat?
25%.
25%. Where would you say it is now, short-term versus long?
We're just about 8% on
8%.
unhedged variable rate.
So you have basically less than a third of what the board has approved for short-term debt.
I think that, in addition to that, I think, Chuck, if you look at news media reports, they've been predicting interest rate hikes for about 2 years now, and external events always change that. But one thing that needs to be pointed out is the federal tax laws prohibit what's called an early issuance. So we can't just issue debt for the sake of issuing debt. We have disclosure that that contemplates and sets forth when we issue debt and why. We have a history, and we can't just issue debt early, absent the capital plan and absent other things that have been in place historically for us to issue the debt. So that's another thing to keep in mind.
Okay, we need to move forward now because we're going to schedule. So we have an action item. We need to vote on that, right, Doug?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the approval of the variable rate refunding bond, motion, please. Jim? Yep, Freddie. Second, please. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion, the action item carries. Okay, Doug?
Yes, the next item is the addition of outside counsel to approve towards FILA panel. So we're asking the board to approve the addition of Crumby Law Group LLC, a law firm that is registered as a New York State minority business enterprise with offices in Connecticut, to MTA's existing panel of approved outside counsel for assignment of tort and Federal Employee Liability Act matters.
Just so you all know, I've spoken to Jerry Page, and I wanted him to give us a review of the current spending on outside legal counsel and historically where it's run. And he has promised me, which I know, of course, he will do, a report back, and we'll share it with the committee just to have a handle on what we're spending on outside counsel. But I would like to take a vote to approve the outside counsel being added, if that's okay. A motion, please. Second. Second, please. Second. All in favor? Any opposed? So moved. Doug?
Next item is the 2015 State Public Work Enforcement Fund Assessment, PWEF. We are asking the board to authorize a sum of $2,873,129, which represents the state assessment on the MTA and its constituent agencies for the Public Work Enforcement Fund for the calendar year 2015.
A motion, please. A second, please. All in favor? Any opposed? So moved.
Okay, next we would move to report and information items. Included in your report is the quarterly contract change order report. That's also reported to the CPOC committee. And the next item is an update on the IT transformation. Sid Jeleno is here to do that presentation.
So just before, Sid, you go, there's two, I think, very important things that are going on behind the scenes. One is this IT transformation and the consolidation of the IT department, which I think is long in coming and really is part of the whole business center and business services center that we're doing. The other thing is the update on the procurement consolidation, which Angel's going to make right after. And I feel these are really important things that we've all worked on for many years. So go ahead.
Good afternoon. Today's just a brief update on where we are with the IT transformation. As of the first of the year, we completed the transformation of the organization. All IT staff report up to me as CIO for the MTA. What this does is gives us the ability to align our IT goals with the MT goals and their strategies, optimize resources across the MTA, service delivery, and provide improved security and controls in the IT arena. So what we've done is we've taken the MTA mission and the corporate priorities and mapped them to the IT vision and IT goals. Next slide. So in essence, everything we do has to meet the corporate priorities. We map them out, and also the IT goals as the secondary. And through a heavy governance process, we manage this as new projects come in and as we disapprove or approve projects. Next slide. So what have we done so far? In 2014, as I just alluded to, we've got the organization designed. All core IT processes were aligned, and we created a best practice document. We established a roadmap on how we were going to bring this group together, working both with the ancillary support groups, HR, budget. We communicated with our staff. We had town hall meetings, CIO blogs, websites, and not only just our staff, but our customers, the MTA community. We worked successfully with the labor unions to get a tentative or interim agreement that allowed us to do this. Quite honestly, we couldn't do it without that agreement. We established a strict governance process with boundaries, with membership from each agency, an executive vice president from each agency sits on that steering committee, and that's where we get our direction from. They set the priorities and goals for us. We had a huge human resources lift that we dealt with in just selecting the leadership of the new organization and making sure that we went through a fair process, a resume searching and interviewing process to get these people in place. Next slide. Our goals for 2015, part of the organization had outsourced desktop support at Transit, and then most of the other agencies, but the Long Island Railroad and Metro North, had an outsourced help desk. We brought that in-house as of May 18th, excuse me. We brought that in-house now. So that's completed. We're working on a PeopleSoft upgrade. That is underway. One of the commitments we made was for 2015, a 6% budget reduction, which included 59 positions, permanent cuts, and a savings of $25 million was achieved. 10.5 of that was permanent and reoccurring. We published a IT strategic plan. It's a 5-year plan, basically saying where we're going, the technologies we're looking at, and the partnership that we definitely need within with our partners in the agencies. The biggest and one of the most important things that we've just started this year is IT rationalization. Almost half of the IT staff, or about 1,000 people, that's what they are. They're application programmers. We've got over 700 different applications, and quite honestly, they're duplicated across the agency. So one of the big lists for us is to look at these applications, make sure there's a value to us on reducing or sunsetting these applications, and moving ahead with one version of that application to support all the agencies. It's very time-consuming and it's very customer-heavy because to do this, we're going to need our customers to change some business processes. We're going to need to try to get the business processes as close as the same across the agencies as possible. But this is where the money in IT is, supporting these applications. Again, we put the leadership in. We're constructing a new operations and security command center. Quite honestly, we've outgrown the one we have. And with all the new security tools that we have to update to protect our environment, we need to bring on additional staff, more staff that can be more analytical, looking at stuff that's going on across our servers and networks and coming in from the internet, so we can be a lot more proactive. As I've said many a times to my bosses, is that I can't sit here today and guarantee somebody can't get in. What I want to know is I want to know they got in. I want to know what to do to stop them from doing damage. We published the MTA org chart, IT org chart, which was a long time coming because we were going through all these changes. And we reinitiated the employee performance appraisal system. Some key challenges. Just like I mentioned, within the business community, getting business processes the same across the board. Well, there was 5 operating agencies, and every IT department had their own way of doing business. We're struggling now to bring that together, making one policy. There's hundreds of policies out there that we're looking at. So what we do is we go through a process where we put together the new policy. We go to corporate communications, corporate compliance, and make sure that we're doing everything the right way, and then we will go through the formal sign-off on that. Another big thing is spending priorities. It used to be you can just come to IT, ask us to do something, and we do it. Now, through the governance process, we put rigorous spending. The customers really have to demonstrate their ability to the steering committee why they need this gun. We look at things that have a positive ROI. We frown on things that are just nice things to do with no ROI. And that's the business model that we're using going forward. That's it. That's all I have. Are there any questions?
You say you have 1,000 people working in IT in this operation?
Incumbents stated about 960. We've got a number of vacancies.
Okay, and you're looking to hire more people? I mean, what is the headcount goal here for this consolidation effort? And is this short-term? At the end of the day, are we going to end up with more population or less employee population?
In the long term, I think it would be less. Again, as we start eliminating applications, the need to have that many programs there to support those applications dwindles. I can tell you in 2016, my commitment today is to reduce my head count by 69. So over the 2 years, it would be 59 and 69.
Okay. I just, not directed at you, but to the chair. I mean, one of the things that this committee did fairly well in the recent past, but has not had a lot of conversation lately, is the looking at areas of redundancy and duplication agency to agency. Now, I understand we're in the beginning somewhat of this process here, but I don't think that anybody wants to see this become a growth enterprise and get away from the mantra of, you know, money goes into direct services as opposed to support services. So, Mr. Chairman, I would hope that you will continue your leadership in pushing the consolidation of redundancies as it exists across agency lines so that we get smaller, whether it be IT or legal departments or whatever we can find unnecessary or duplicative non-transportation service expense.
Commissioner, that's exactly what we're trying to do. The one commitment that I did make when we first started this consolidation is that we would not do headcount reduction until we made certain that we were able to continue to provide the services that each of the agencies had previously had, because I did not want to do a consolidation that left people hanging. So the commitment was that we would try to get the organization properly aligned to meet the needs and the goals that we have for the whole company. And once that was in place, then we would start to push for the efficiencies. And clearly the efficiencies will be in headcount, and I think you've heard now effectively about a reduction of almost 60 and about 70 next year that will be done, off of not 1,000, because that's the number of positions, but off an already lower headcount. Then there will be other savings that will come about, and as Sid said, this reduction in the number of applications from 700 down to a much more manageable is really going to be key, because you don't need as many people to manage it. So you'll save on both the licenses, you'll save on just the actual number of people necessary to maintain them. So there is going to be a continued push to try to get maximum efficiencies while delivering enhanced services we can. But it was with our direction that we didn't start the headcount reduction until we did have this go live. So
The other thing, too, is a lot of money. If you remember all the procurements that we approve here on licensing software, licensing maintenance, as we cut down the number of support systems that we have here, that's going to go way down, and that's many, many millions of dollars. I think huge amounts of money in this licensing and maintenance of software, and I think that's actually going to be one of the big savings of this project, because you're not going to have these millions, like Sid said, all these different applications that each agency had. Everybody had all different kinds of things. We're going to have a uniform, hopefully when Sid's through, we're going to have a uniform system that operates in the total MTA world. So we're going to eliminate a lot of these things that we had going on here.
May I give you a footnote to that? We are still being asked to approve extensions of software licenses for 3 to 5 years going forward. And it would seem to me that what we ought to do is constrain that somewhat so as to permit that kind of consolidation to which you speak.
Sid, do you have a plan for that? I mean, these software, I don't know, I haven't been that close to it, but the software licenses and maintenance agreements that come up now, before they come up here and they're put before the committees, I assume we're looking at these and these applications that are going to be gone.
Yeah, yes, in conjunction with Angels Group, we look at, first we've got a contract database. We go through that contract database. A couple of examples, Microsoft. Everybody, all the agencies use Microsoft's products. we brought them together. Angel did some negotiation. We dropped the prices down, and it was advantageous to the MTA. One of the other things on the operations side we're looking at is scheduling systems. Each agency uses a product called Hastis for scheduling or crewing in some different way. We're talking to the manufacturer now, trying to get them in to get an enterprise agreement and drop prices. But, you know, I only go so far, and then I turn it over to my partner in crime to really get the economies on bringing this stuff together.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit as well. Okay.
Yeah, so next, Angel Barbosa is going to talk about procurements.
Thank you. Yeah. Go ahead, one more. So just to recap where we are with consolidation from last year, in July 2014, the chairman and CEO directed the agency procurement groups to collaborate in an effort to consolidate procurement of non-core categories in a centralized procurement group at the Business Service Center. And obviously, this is part of our ongoing cost reduction efforts. One thing to note is that unlike joint procurements, the consolidation effort also involves the transitioning of staff that support those procurements and manage those procurements. So it's not just an activity of buying something together, it's actually moving the staff that supports those categories over to one group. Each operating agency will be responsible for procurement of their core categories, and I'll go on to define in a later slide what core and non-core is. HQ procurement will be responsible for the non-core categories. These categories are things like office supplies, non-revenue vehicles, personal computers, benefits, and et cetera. Decisions and policy making for non-core categories will be made at the centralized group, but we'll continue to get input from the agencies, even though they specifically be procured out of the centralized group. So right now, go live is set for January 1st, 2016, with a phased approach starting in October. So essentially, we have a really good opportunity for transformation at this point. There's some collaborative initiatives that are happening today that have been happening for several years. The joint procurement process has been successful. It's delivered savings. So that's a collaborative effort that happens today. The Procurement Council, myself and all my counterparts, we meet sometimes weekly, most of the time bi-weekly, and we handle all of our strategic initiatives in supply chain and policy and strategic direction. So we do meet collaboratively already. From a strategic factor perspective, with the announcement by the chairman and CEO for consolidation, we have process standardization being driven across all the agencies, both in the consolidation and SID's IT transformation, as well as the 9.2 upgrade, and also current MTA and agency leadership, where they're all aligned in driving more value through procurement. So it's not. This is the purpose of the consolidation has always been to say that there have been things that have been done very well, and now we're trying to move on to our next level of efficiency. So one of the parts of the consolidation that originally I kicked off was what's called a P2P review or procure-to-pay review. It's a process to look at the end-to-end processes for your procurement group. So the assessment of the end-to-end procure-to-pay process was to document current state processes, identify gaps from leading practices, and internal pockets of excellence. And that last part of that statement is really important. One of the things we are keen to recognize is that there are things that are done really well at the agencies as well. So by no means are we saying that centralizing in the BSCR headquarters is the end-all answer. There are really good things that happen at the agencies and center of excellence at the agencies as well. We want to define improvement opportunities and a roadmap, and then really importantly, provide a recommendation for our P2P technology going forward. So in this P2P process review, we engaged many different constituents. So there were 56 management interviews. There were 50 focus groups with 250 different procurement staff were interviewed and met with. There were actual 15 PeopleSoft walkthroughs. And it's just important to note that The procurement groups for the last several years have had significant issues from a PeopleSoft perspective. So one of the things we wanted to do was take a look at the system, have staff sit with them and see what exactly are some of the things that we could do to help things be improved. And then we actually met with 5 suppliers as well to interview them. So what came out of the P2P process review? Some really key issues. 361 issues were identified that revealed a lot of information based that could be categorized in a couple of different buckets. One thing that became clear during the outcome was that it wasn't just a technology issue that we have. We have other improvement areas around data, process and policy, skills and organization. One of the things that we had heard initially from all the procurement groups, and it was warranted, was that there was issues with PeopleSoft from a platform perspective for our procurement staff. And that is true, this is not to say that it's not true, but we have other areas that we can improve as well. So the assessment actually showed us that. So technology, 36%, but you could see that we have other areas where we can improve on. So the assessment in terms of the technology and what kind of recommendation it provided told us to do a couple of things. So first of all, there are 2 modules in place today in PeopleSoft, ePro and purchasing, which we're going to improve. They're not quite configured the right way for the procurement staff, and we think that we can do some quick wins there and help streamline some of the processes. We are going to implement a strategic sourcing module, and this is all through the PeopleSoft 9.2 upgrade. And that's a whole new module. It'll help deal with online activity with our vendors. It's a tremendous opportunity for us to be more streamlined and automated, do things online with our suppliers, self-service, and things that aren't done today. E-supplier connection, another module, very similar, allows our suppliers to deal with us through an online mechanism, which we don't do today. We're going to implement a marketplace. It's called Vinamaya. It's basically a shopping experience where contracted items are put out on a website for various vendors. And it's a self-service way for users to go out and place orders, kind of take procurement out of some of the more transactional activities that they don't necessarily have to be in. For future consideration, we're looking at a requisitioning tool and a supplier contracts module. A requisitioning tool simply makes it easier to actually create requisitions. And the supplier contracts module, something that we sorely need, in that it's a repository for our contracts. It also allows for workflow, for our legal counterparts, for other stakeholders to review contracts within PeopleSoft. So as far as the procurement consolidation itself, one of the things that we wanted to make sure we understand in terms of consolidation was, what are we spending our money on? And in order to find core or non-core, do an analysis of our spend and uncover any opportunities for savings. I head up the procurement group that's in headquarters out of the BSC, and I also wanted to make sure that I start preparing that group for consolidation. So one of the things what we wanted to do was look at core competencies that you want in your procurement group, and also build an organization, what your future organization should look like as you try to consolidate. And then the last item was implement a category management approach. And all that really means is that it's great that we do requisition-based activities, and they do deliver savings, but the category management approach takes a look at a whole category and tries to do analysis of the category, the market, the suppliers, the players. It's more of a proactive way to try to attack your spend. So through this spend analysis, which is really the key part of the process, we delineated a certain amount of spend through the assessment. Core spend was about $4.3 billion. Non-core spend, which is the spend that's going to be consolidated at this point, was $3.3 billion. And you'll see what we're trying to depict here is just the swing of non-core versus core. So core are all your rolling stock, trains, buses, all the things that are required, signaling equipment, software for signaling equipment. They're required to support the agencies from a core perspective. The non-core, and those are more materials that are common across agencies and not specifically directly affecting rolling stock, things like off supplies, healthcare, utilities. These are the things that are going to be centralized in one procurement group. So we analyze the spend, and this is, in general sense, this is a spend opportunity for the non-core, $3.3 billion. So the summary of the spend analysis, and I'm sorry I see you squinting, I'm sorry it's so small. We'll share this with you afterwards. But essentially, when you look at the spend, there's a certain portion of the spend, even in the non-core spend, that's addressable, that you can actually act on. Some part of the spend you just can't. So what we came up with, of the $7.7 billion in spend, the actual addressable spend was 1.4 billion is addressable. And what we said in the consolidation was it's not simply to consolidate staff, but also to determine if there's any opportunities for sourcing or savings. And what you see on the right side of the slide is really the category opportunity identification. And we indicate 74 million or 6% of this addressable spend could be sourceable. What we're really attacking right now are the first 7 categories. They're going to deliver approximately $10 million of spend in the first year. Those categories, and you can see those are what you would think of are non-core. They're non-commercial vehicles, non-revenue fleet maintenance, IT consulting, IT hardware, managed print services, which is printers, faxes, office supplies, office equipment, and security services. So those are our first wave of categories, along with the consolidation of staff. These categories specifically, we're looking to source across all the agencies and deliver savings in the next year. Okay. Yeah. And so I zipped through that, but where are we right now? We're going to move forward with the 7. Do you have a question? Oh,
Sentence.
I'm sorry.
Finish your sentence and I'll.
We're going to move forward with 7 non-core categories through sourcing activities. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine on.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Give me a sense of where your 10.2 million savings estimate came from.
It came from the spend analysis of all so we grouped categories, core and non-core, based on interactions with my counterparts. Then we took those spend categories, specific categories, analyzed them, cleansed them, made the data available, the available data usable from a procurement perspective. Because what we get out of PeopleSoft kind of isn't really what we need to do to look at it from a purchase perspective. And then we look at historical benchmarks around what can you normally do when you do hardware and software. These are conservative numbers. These are in the 3-4%. We've had other analysis historically done at the MTA where things are like 7, 8, 9, 10%.
So you're just applying some benchmark. Someone says I can get you 3% better pricing and that's it, or these are actually specific to the category that says we know because of what we spend it on, we can see because company X, Y, and Z are doing better than we are, we can get to that account. How specific are these? Because I've seen these before where someone just says, yeah, you can get 5% better, right. And that's either right or wrong.
It's the latter, because what happens is the analysis takes into account, you said, you hit a good point. What are other constituent organizations paying on average for these types of services or goods? So it's the latter analysis. It's not just, can we figure out where we are? It's a really in-depth analysis of our spend activity.
And where are you getting those benchmarks from?
Other resources. KPMG ran this actual analysis, but we use, there are other ways of trends and markets and studies and whatnot. You can do comparisons against other competing firms and whatnot. So there's a wealth of information, not even just McKinsey, from other firms that are provide us information and benchmarks for us against other both private and public sector organizations.
For the past few years, Chairman Saul, Commissioner Ballin, I, and others have made 2 points that have involved in-depth examination of the various procurements. One is a general dislike for sole source, and number 2, which Mr. Saul has focused on at some length, and number 2 is the question of soliciting the broadest band of competition that one can in terms of the procurements. And I have said to you, and I would like to repeat it now publicly, I believe it is absolutely imperative that you bring in a respected consulting group like McKinsey, Boston, there are several of them, they're easily defined, to help us deal at an early stage as you go forward with consolidation, with trying to minimize, if not avoid, the sole source problem and the lack of competition problem. I'll give you one very simple example. In response a minute ago to the question, well, how have you gotten that information? Your response was there are various entities from which we can get competitive figures. This morning at Transit, I asked, how on earth do you know that that's the best price you're getting, that you can get on uniforms by extending the contract for 3 years? Well, we asked the person who bid second last time, but they didn't go out into the field. They didn't go out and check. And what my point to you is simply this. I don't have the expertise. You may well. But it seems to me we ought to get in at this early stage a consultant that can tell us this is the best way to avoiding sole source or minimizing it, and this is the best way to stimulating competition. And I repeat that request to you again. And you're going to hear it as long as I'm on this board, until we start getting rid of these sole source contracts or minimizing them.
So,
I think after listening to these two reports about the IT and the procurement, I have some memories. We go back about 10 years of trying to pull together a shared services. That was something that no one ever thought of, that we could never make it. And I have a quote from one of the procurement officers in this very organization that said, joint procurements and/or consolidated departments would never save the MTA 1 cent. That was a quote. And we pushed and pushed for shared services. It developed into the business service center, and it developed into the joint procurements. It's developing into the IT. So this is not something that just came up. It's something that we've worked on for a long time, and I think we're finally seeing some fruit at the end of the tunnel.
Only thing is, I would just caution everybody, to me, and I don't mean to denigrate the work that, the fellows have done, the staff, but we're just at the beginning of this thing. And I agree with Chuck, the sole source is a real problem. There's tons of money that can be saved here. These two things in IT and, of course, purchasing, there's an awful lot of savings here, and we're just beginning to get our hands around it. It's just beginning to get consolidated. I don't want to kid anybody that this thing is just rolling and we're just doing all these joint procurements. I think this is a work in process, and I think we have to keep on this thing and make sure this is done, because I agree with Jim. This is so important. You're running a consolidated operation. No business this size would be running with everybody doing their own thing, 6 different divisions. There's no possible way. You couldn't run the thing right. And if you want to get more service to our customers, which we all want to do. You want to keep the fares down. Boy, right here is a real way to do this. And I think we as fiduciaries have to make sure that this gets accomplished. And we can't drag our feet with it, because there's a lot of savings here. Tons. I agree with Jim after being here for a long time.
I'm going to wrap up, but just a couple comments. I think one thing's important is that KPMG came in and did an assessment that we asked them to do. The assessment was assess our procurement groups across all the agencies. We didn't ask them to determine fairness, to do any sort of auditing of how competitive we are. So in terms of scope, they provided and they met the challenge of the scope. I think the other thing, and I don't want it to get lost in this presentation, is I don't disagree with you as far as being fair and competitive, but I do think that we talked a little bit about technology here. I think we're doing a disservice to our procurement groups if we don't equip them with a procurement platform that can take them to future levels. I mean, it's very important that some of these things get done. And then you and I have traded emails about McKinsey, and we've talked at length about that. So I think it's something that if we want to look at that further, I definitely think it's possible.
All I'm asking you to do is to take a look at it. I gainsay nothing that you have said. I do not disagree. The point I'm trying to make is, I would like to, at the end of the day, know that Andy Salt's efforts over a period of more years than mine, and my efforts and Commissioner Ballin's efforts to get away from sole source and to stimulate competition are things that experts in that area tell us are doable and devices that we can. It never hurts to pick another brain. And given the amount, as Chairman Saul has pointed out, the amounts involved here, that's the difference between service and no service.
I agree with you. Yep.
Okay.
Yes, one last information item of the MTA financial statements for the first quarter. The draft of the Independent Accountant's Review Report of MTA financial statements for the 3 months ended March 31, 2015. It's on Director's desk. It will be presented and voted on the Audit Committee meeting on Wednesday, June 24th, 2015. Next, we have 3 competitive procurements for headquarters for a grand total of $17,035,966. Andrew?
A motion, please. Second, please. All in favor? Any opposed? So moved, Doug.
Moving to Metro North and Long Island Railroad, we have for Metro North, we have 2 procurements, one being non-competitive, one competitive jointly with the Long Island Railroad for a grand total of $7,454,778.
A motion, please. Second, please. All in favor? Any opposed?
There are
So moved.
There are 2 procurements for the Long Island Railroad, one competitive, one non-competitive, for a grand total of $108,088,209.
Second, please. All in favor? Any opposed? So moved.
Moving to New York City Transit MTA bus operations, there's one competitive procurement for an estimated $94,808,340.
Motion, please. Second. All in favor? Any opposed? Moved. So moved.
For bridges and tunnels, there's one competitive multi-agency procurement for an RFP totaling $195 million.
Motion. Second. All in favor? Any opposed? So moved.
There are no items for FIMPTAC. Within the book are the MTA consolidated reports, which contain the April financials. And I would then turn over the report to the finance portion, and Jeff Rosen.
Jeff, go ahead.
Thanks, Andrew. We have 11 items this month, each the subject of a separate staff summary in your materials. Be glad to take questions about any of them. I should note that the 5th item in the books relating to a sublease for a 10-foot strip on the edge of our right-of-way in Chappaqua has been the subject of some prior public comments from public speakers at previous meetings. I just want to make 2 points about this. The first is that we've addressed this request in the normal course in the real estate department as a business proposition. Frankly, it's of no great consequence. In terms of the local approvals, that is a matter for the town board. This project has been entitled by the local land use officials. Our safety people at Metro North have examined at length the safety concerns that have been raised by members of the public and have concluded that there is no threat to safety or impairment of our general operations from this accommodation, and consequently we're recommending it.
When do they expect, all things, being equal, when do they expect to be done with the construction of that project in Chappaqua?
I don't know the answer to that, John. I can find out.
But this isn't just a hypothetical
No,
approval we're doing?
No,
You're actually ready to go?
No, they've been waiting all this time and for our approval and approval from state DOT relating to the parkway on the other side. I know there's been some tweaks at the town board level, which I believe are completed, so they're ready to go.
On the enterprise and zip car items, was there competitive bidding on this in any form?
Absolutely. As noted, we have The incumbent enterprise is re-upping here, but we reached out to all of the major auto rental firms and encouraged them to make proposals. And in addition, for the first time, we specifically encouraged competition from, ride-sharing services of the kind exemplified by Zipcar. I will say that this arrangement does not preclude other rent-a-car companies from, renting cars to people who are getting off of trains. This is fundamentally about exposure, our ability as an amenity for our riders to say on our website that one will reliably find a rent-a-car opportunity at the other end of a train journey. So for us, it's first and foremost an amenity.
Jeff, just to complete my information for my benefit, what did we do to reach out to them? Did we communicate in writing? Did we call people? What did we do?
Yeah, Dave, I don't know.
Okay. Thank you.
Here's another question.
Two quick things. One on that, do you have a quick theory as to why no one else was interested? It seems odd. And then I have one more quick comment.
Well, I think it has to do with fulfillment. They don't actually keep the cars at the train station. That's not where their facilities are. My understanding is that Enterprise has a slightly different fulfillment model than most of the other majors. They tend to be more dispersed and consequently are closer to our, if you look at the list in the staff summary, you'll see that the service is available to a very broad cross-section of our stations, and that for us is the most important thing. So this is all about the ability to send a shuttle or a van to the station for pickup on demand, and then when the user leaves the car and drops the keys into a bucket, then somebody has to come and get the car within 24 hours. So it's not their sort of standard airport model.
Okay, and then the last comment is on number 1A, I just feel compelled as the person who caused the controversy on the trees to see such wonderful intergovernmental cooperation with the Parks Department on something for the children on the murals. And I would just ask that maybe you can have them take a picture of it before we erase it. And it's great to work together with them.
Well, we're going to be charging, I believe, by the half gallon of paint, and we have a special rate there for them.
Okay, so a motion, please, to approve the real estate items. Second, please. All in favor? Any opposed? Jeff, it's approved. There is no executive I'm sorry? Doug, can we make a record of that? Okay. There is no executive session, and I'd like to have a motion to adjourn the Finance Committee.
Can I ask, it's a question I asked in commuter rails meeting this morning.
Yeah, I was going to come find you, but I'm glad to answer here. It's about the Biltmore Room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure it's of import to everybody on the committee. Sure. Does the construction there necessitate the removal of all three businesses in that space?
The plan is to allow the shoe shine business to remain in operation. Each has a sort of a front they present to the public, and then a modest back of house operation. So we're kind of mixing and matching. The shoe shine is going to be able to continue to operate. They do some shoe repair that they'll be able to service out of the store they have near Dunkin' Donuts down by the office building.
Gotcha.
And Dahlia is going to move into they're going to move their actual display and sales into the Gray Bar Passage, where Cobbler and Shine is now. And for the near term and to the middle term, I believe they'll be able to be used their back of house as before. So
That answers my question. Thank you.
thanks.